slept really well. On a good routine for sleeping. Good routine for most things at the moment. So that's very nice. Uh, but nonetheless, it's time to work. So this week has all been about the basics of living mindfulness. So living mindfulness is just what it means to be living your life with a greater sense of awareness. Okay? So what is awareness? Well, awareness is the ability to perceive what's going on beyond just your own understandings of what's going on in your head. So things to keep in mind about living in your head. If you live in your head, right? If your understanding of life is based on the interpretation of what you think, right? Without any kind of awareness other than that, you can get trapped. I mean, way trapped. And I think we're seeing that a lot now. To be trapped is to be kind of convinced that your understanding of things is the right understanding of things, and because you're convinced that you're right, anything that comes against what you perceive got to be wrong. So it's this very bifurcated experience of your awareness versus everything else. That's no bueno. Okay, it's not good. And I think we're kind of seeing that now. I read some articles about 45 from his niece. She wrote a tell-all book. Man, it's got to be tough being 45, boy. Woo. So anyway, she wrote this book, and in the book she describes 45's father, and she describes how there was this battle between 45 and his brother, and it was all around business. There was no room for weakness. There was no room for vulnerability in any way, shape, or form. And the degree to which that environment was perpetuated by their father was unimaginable. And pitting one against the other, one brother against the other brother, lying as a fundamental art form. I think it was so bad that I think the brother's not alive anymore, and I'm not exactly sure what happened there, but that's just, and even I think even 45 has talked about his brother in the context of, there was too much pressure to be perfect, too much pressure to take on the family business, too much this, too much that. Didn't end well, right? So anyway, that got me thinking about my dad. And in the context of seeing things beyond what I perceive or beyond what I think or analyze, I started thinking about my dad. And the way I thought about my dad is twofold. I thought about him in terms of aggression and surrender. And I think it was a perfect kind of combination that really ultimately now over time I've come to see is incredibly valuable. So that's why I said thanks, Dad. So what I mean is, he, without ever being physical, was able to create the most piercing, aggressive, dominating, overpowering type of presentation without being physical to someone else. His presentation was physical. Sound, face, body language, tone, tempo of language. I mean, everything. when he wanted to go aggressive and to make a point without being physical, I can't emphasize that enough, he could become unbelievably aggressive. You know how the sound of a dog, when a dog becomes aggressive and you can just tell it's different from a playful bark? When my dad did that, it was just, it would just cut me to the core. And so anyway, as a kid growing up, that was always, okay, so that was that side. Now the other side was surrender, okay? So the other side was a total and complete and utter surrender to a moment, and in particular to my mother. So my mother, who was just unbelievable compassion and patience and just will and strength, cunning as well. She was able to absorb whatever he came with aggressively, neutralize it with a glance or with a statement, and then he would just surrender. He would just kind of, and not like surrender, like fall apart, that kind of thing, although he does do that. But I'm talking surrender like, okay. So he'd go as hard as he could possibly go, and then he would come to realize that was wrong, or that was off, or it wasn't the right direction, and he'd surrender. And so he would basically stop all the kind of activation and just surrender completely. And so what that developed in him was an incredibly powerful kind of intellect, skill set for interacting with others, but also an incredible relationship with God, with his community, his kids, and especially underdogs. Like my dad was a big supporter of the underdog. And his basic idea was the underdog is the hidden gem, right? If you've got someone who's just by nature an underdog, so he downtrodden, anybody that's been oppressed in any kind of way, he worked hard to make sure that type of stuff didn't happen around him. So he just helped out a lot of ways, and I think he was, he was he is at kind of still the top of his game professionally. But he's still always rooting for, supporting, helping the underdog. So this is this kind of relationship between aggression and surrender. And so the point I'm making is I've come to realize that, and I've come to understand my father much better. And the reason why I've come to understand my father much better is because I understand mindfulness. And what I mean by that is that fathers create a type of environment inside their children that is unparalleled. It's unparalleled by anything. And my thing with my dad was I never wanted to disappoint him, and I always wanted to get him like excited about things. Because inside the spectrum of surrender and aggression were all these kind of just really full experiences. And to have my dad excited or proud of me was just the best feeling in the world. Now, the opposite of that was if he was disappointed in me, it was unbelievable. The feeling was unbelievable, massive, just humongous. Now, as a kid, I never perceived it as feeling. I just perceived it as in here. But in my older days, even now, I can now feel it in my body. So I was with him about 3 weeks ago, and a situation arose where I felt that he was disappointed in what I had done or what was going on. And I just remember the feeling coming back. And I remember being in the moment, and I remember being aware of the feeling, and I remember being like, I remember this feeling. It's bigger than almost any other feelings I've had to date. Gosh, how do you survive that as someone without awareness? And I remember just sitting there inside the feeling and just being in awe of how big it was. And I remember thinking like, man, this is super powerful now, and I'm removed from it. My dad's no longer kind of overpowering, like in a position of power over me. Whoa, this is so big. And I just remember being amazed, one, by the feeling, and that it still was just as powerful now at the age of 40 as it was at the age of like 13. So I remember that, and then I remembered like, okay, I I'm aware of this. Like I could move. Before I was just powerless. I remember I can move, and I remember it was. I just felt very fortunate that I was able to kind of perceive the feeling and then move away from it. But then that takes me back to last night and thinking about 45 and his dad. And all of a sudden, for the first time, I saw 45 in a different light. And I felt bad. I felt bad for him. Because if his experience with his father was one of just aggression, right? If there was no surrender to it, there was just aggression, then and it holds truth, it holds sway that a father and a son, that relationship is just massively powerful. And if there was no surrender in that relationship, and it didn't come from anywhere, it couldn't come from anywhere. Maybe 45's mother wasn't capable of handling it or counterbalancing it, or the power that 45's father wielded was just so big that the notion of surrender was just not even there. And then tie in the kind of the lying and the kind of the vulnerability of the brother. I want to say the brother committed suicide. I think that's what happened. So of course I'm making these jumps, but I mean I'm putting the pieces together as they present themselves. But anyway, that environment, right? The environment of no surrender ever, as a way of life, not as a way of combat, but a way of life. I can't imagine. And then if you're not present and you're completely in your head, so whatever you're thinking is reality, and that anything other than that reality is wrong, and if to even accept other than what you perceive is a form of vulnerability and weakness. Like if that is the identity of 45 that came from his father, who was also like that, then that is just brutal. So brutal. So brutal. And just the thought of my dad never being proud of me, and even when I did the things he wanted to do, it not being enough, and all that kind of stuff, year after year after year, before I became present, before I became aware. I mean, it's just brutal. So, thanks, Dad. Thanks for being all of it. All of it. Anyway, let's do some training. Let's do some practice. Settle on that. Okay, look around for something that has space in between it. So like legs of a table, the space in between the legs. Or stairs, the space in between the stairs. Or the volume of, say, a refrigerator. Or the space in a room. So just take a second and just look at the space that is around things as opposed to the things themselves. It's a little bit weird. Space around things? What the hell are you talking about? But the space around things is something to focus on, and it totally disrupts the brain. It totally disrupts the mind. The brain itself can do it. It's not used to doing it because it's used to looking at objects, but it can do it. In the process of doing it, it totally confuses the mind because the mind is always interweaving memory and past into present. And so if the mind is kind of like, the mind's typically focused. That's why curiosity tames the mind. So look for space. And then once you've kind of taken some spatial observation in, go ahead, close your eyes. Do the same thing with sound. So this time it's space in between sounds. So instead of thinking about the sounds, think about the space in between them. Now shift to sense of taste. What's your mouth taste like? Smell. Now let's move to second bell. Second bell, ground. What's beneath you? Pelvis, base of your spine, core, heart space, throat, top of the head. Feel your whole body and try to make it 5% more comfortable. 5%. Just a little bit. Oh, that's nice. Now let's move into the breath. Full breath in. Blow it out fast. Full breath in. Blow it out fast. One more time. Full breath in. Blow it out fast. Now, in through the mouth, slow. Hold. Out through the nose, slow. In through the mouth, slow. Hold. Out through the nose, slow. In through the nose, slow. Out through the mouth, fast. In through the nose, slow. Out through the mouth, fast. Now, this spatial idea, right? Spatial idea. Notice what happens when you breathe breath in through your nose slow. Think about the space that the breath is going into, the two little nostrils, and then out fast through the mouth. Open your mouth wide. We'll do that 3 times, and just notice the space difference. Notice the space and speed difference, okay? In through the nose slow, out through the mouth fast, 3 times. After your third time, let's sit for a minute. So setting intentions is all about taking a clear understanding of your mind's ability to perceive reality and move into that reality with a plan. And while it's what intentions do, setting an intention is kind of in kind of an infinite amount of space. It's creating a whole. It's kind of creating a whole of kind of openness inside of like an infinite opportunity. It's make a whole. It's you're making a whole and focusing on what falls into that whole as kind of the thing that you are intending to do. So it's like you're moving into the unknown with this kind of space that's like, okay, inside of this space I'm putting what? And so on Wednesdays, it's inside this space I'm going to put gratitude. So I'm going to move through that space with gratitude. So whatever is kind of coming into that space, I'm going to move through it with gratitude. And so today I'm going to talk to my dad about my observation of aggression and surrender in the context of 45 and just tell him thanks. Tell him thanks. So love to hear about your intentions as always. Feel free to be as vulnerable as you want on Armor Down, right? That's the whole point. Be vulnerable, share. It's good practice. It's very good practice. If you don't practice, you could become the opposite, right? You might make the mistake of thinking that what you're thinking is the right thing. So anyway, always a pleasure, Armor Down. See you tomorrow.